I'm not gonna lie. I've actually been looking forward to making this episode for quite a while. Mostly because a lot of the things that I've been hearing people say, whether online or even just out in the open, has just sort of made me feel like this conversation needs to be had. But to kind of start things off properly, I feel like I should probably start with a quote that I'm gonna use at the end. If we don't come together and have a conversation around these expectations of ours at some point very soon, a lot of us are gonna be looking back at this time about 20 years from now, and they're gonna be very pissed off, and they're going to conclude that we actually fucked up about 2 generations worth of people. So, with that said, I probably should start because I kind of seem to have lost my manners, because normally you start with a greeting. So, welcome to Break Time on West Side, your number one Break Time podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who still believes that jumping to conclusions can help with cardio, because it is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is raw zone, why keep it short, why keep it straight to the point, and there's usually no instrumentals. So I guess if you're kind of into the whole instrumentals thing, then I'm sorry. Either way, I do have my thoughts that I usually like to put on these episodes, why I keep it short. Now, I'm supposed to be doing like a full-on deep dive into the expectations thing, and I want to start things off in a pretty soft and sort of light way. Now, back in January, I sort of restarted a friendship that I had with someone that I hadn't spoken with in about almost 3 years or some shit. And while she was busy catching me up with her life and the fact that she's been with 2 guys and the relationships didn't end up very well because they seemed like boyfriend or husband material, but they didn't particularly end up. So she was busy talking about why she wants to take a break and she's gonna let the guys come to her. And I can remember us guys having a back and forth on this, and at some point I just asked her what exactly it is that she wanted from a guy, just in case I could recommend someone. And contrary to what some people might have actually thought would have come out of this, she actually kept it very, very simple. Because what she said she wanted was tall, dark, handsome, and financially stable. Now, the moment I read this, it almost kind of felt like one of those Kevin Samuels moments and shit, and I almost felt like I was gonna be a Kevin Samuels in this situation. So, what I said was, okay, out of all of those things, I don't think you're gonna find too many guys that are like that, so if you were to give up one of them, which one would it be? And I was waiting for her to be like, no, I can't give any of them up, blah, 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 I require all of these in a man. But she kind of outsmarted me on this one, and she literally just said, I don't mind getting a light-skinned dude, so you can remove the dark part. And in my head, I was like, well played. Well fucking played. Because normally you'd expect a babe to say a bunch of other things. First of all, she kept it simple. Then she at least got rid of the one piece that probably carries the least amount of value in all of this. At least in some way or another for a lot of people. But all in all, it still did come down to what it is that the babe wanted in a dude. What it is that she expects from her future potential partner. And it comes down to this one conversation that people need to have, which is, what expectations do we have in the partners that we want? And are those expectations particularly good for us in the long run? And it's one of those conversations that a lot of us probably need to have, regardless of gender, whether it's female or male, even though I do feel like, for the most part, it's probably leaning towards the women in this case. And I will get to that in a little bit, because I feel like when it comes to expectations, guys usually will play with what they have right there and then, and not try to bank on the future. Not unless you're talking about these red pill dudes that are busy talking about, oh, blah, 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 I'm gonna get married at 14, I'll look for a 22-year-old. Because that's a very different story. Because when you look at a lot of what men want today, and fortunately enough, I have actually looked into that, it comes down to about 4 main pointers. And it's usually 1, we want her to be beautiful. 2, we want her to be caring and respectful. 3, we want her to be supportive. And 4, we want her to be able to ride dick like a pro, and or suck it like one, if you're into that kind of thing. And you could also just sort of summarize it pretty easily by saying that we want a lady in the streets, we want a freak in the sheets, and we want a nice caregiver in between all of that. Of which, even though she wasn't that much of a freak in the sheets, as long as the sex is good, we usually don't have that big of a problem. Just have her be decent, respectful, peaceful, and caring, And for most of the part, we usually end up liking the babe and they actually end up being very good settled down and marriage material. Besides stuff like cooking, which is something that can be taught later on. And when you kind of look at it, for a lot of us guys, that is pretty much just what it is that we look for in a babe. We don't tend to be that picky. Some people might be colorist or not, but that also varies as well. But for the most part, you can actually get guys just based off of that particular thing. But now, when you look at what it is that women expect from guys, or at least what women want in their potential man, and you look at it, a lot of what women will say online about what it is that they want, you actually realize that there's a long fucking list. And to kind of try and summarize what it is that the women do want in a dude, it does take quite a bit of observation and quite a bit of listening here and there. And fortunately, or should I say conveniently, I actually did the donkey work on this not too long ago for an article that I did a couple of weeks back for Viralty. And I managed to summarize what it is that women want in a guy to about 4 main things. And, they're pretty short and simple. And it is, they want a king in the streets, a beast in the sheets, a caregiver in the living room. They want a guy that is wanted by other women but has no eyes for any other woman besides them. And I tend to think that encapsulates everything, of which if I'm not, ladies, please feel free to tell me why it is that I've gone wrong. But anyways, all that said and done, now, those are pretty much what it is that women want, okay? And at this point, this is probably the time when you'd expect me to be like, but, with the current environment, blah, 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 like traditional women, like used to do this, but modern women don't do that, and we're getting bare minimum, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And guys today, how do you expect a guy to do this, but a woman also works, blah, blah, blah. Of which, to be very honest, I could have gone with that, but I don't think that is the best way to look at it, because it almost sounds emotional to an extent. Because to be very honest, a lot of what it is that women say they want in a guy or in guys in general is actually sort of warranted, at least by evolutionary psychology terms. Because essentially, women are usually hypergamous, or at least most women are hypergamous in nature. And that's something that you hear people say, and it'll have negative connotations for some people, positive for others. But essentially, it is what it is. And by nature's terms, it's perfectly well within their right for them to actually want the same thing and sort of demand it. Because when you look at the whole financial stability, or going for someone who's in a particularly good standpoint financially, you kind of look back in the day and they were trying to look towards getting their offspring the best possible care, or at least ensure the long-term sustainability of their offspring. So for them to go and look for someone who is quite well endowed in resources, that would actually be a pretty good thing for them, right? It's just that nowadays, when you look at a lot of babes saying that they want a guy with money, it's not necessarily because they're looking for a sustainable future for their kids. Some of them just want the money for themselves because they hate using up their money for adult shit. And, some of them don't even want kids. But, that's sort of a discussion for a different time. Then you also have to look at something like pre-selection bias, which pretty much has moved women towards certain guys for a particularly long time. And to explain pre-selection bias, essentially it's having a bias towards someone who seems to have been chosen or seems to be with someone else because they were sort of selected beforehand by someone else, if I'm making sense of this. To kind of give a pretty good example, and this is something that fellas probably know to heart if they've dated before, if you're moving around with a babe, or if you have a girlfriend, it's like other babes will hit on you a hell of a lot more by default. Like, there are those situations where it's like you had no babes while you were single, but you get this one babe and you start dating her, and babes start crawling out of the woodwork. And that can explain the whole being wanted by other women, but also having eyes just for that one woman that you're with. And I guess I can talk about that and the whole caregiver in the living room shit when you look at the whole origins of monogamy and all, which there's an article to it. If you want to see it, just ask me for it. I'll send it to you. But all in all, you can see how their hypergamy is sort of justified. It's just that when you look at the current landscape that's there right now, it's very hard to look at hypergamy as one of the best ways to go out dating, because when you look at a lot of guys in the current economic landscape, it's not that easy to do. Because a lot of the things that babes want, guys are supposed to, or at least guys are expected to provide. And it's not like it's within the current financial situation or even just living situation for a lot of these guys. Because for the past couple of episodes, I've spoken about how the average young guy in Kenya today, or at least Nairobi, if not other places, is pretty much a guy that's living paycheck to paycheck and has a loan on the side that they're sort of servicing, if not trying to massage their way out of. And that means that there's only so much disposable income that they're going to have before they get to a point where they're actually broke or probably trying to get into debt again. Now, you look at the guys that are there and the guys that you want to have a future with, I don't think you'd want to start a family with someone when they're still stuck deep in debt. Because how exactly will you get something like a mortgage? And you don't even have to look that far. You look at a lot of the short-term things that are being asked of guys nowadays, and from the pricier restaurant bills to the events to the trips, like, guys, economically at least right now, aren't in the best position to be boyfriends, at least as per a lot of the expectations that the babes put out there. Because when women nowadays are very fond of saying that it's a man's role to provide and his money is ours, my money is mine, how exactly do you expect a lot of these guys to actually have some sort of a good financial plan that isn't being torn to shreds by the economic situation and you? Because when you look at some of these events, when you look at some of the things that you want guys to do in the name of being with them, it actually seems like a very, very pricey thing to do. And to kind of conclude, it makes a lot of young guys kind of look at the idea of dating and they become a lot more weary towards it. And as such, these expectations kind of do get to push quite a bit of guys away. And I will address some of those expectations and why, even though some of them didn't just come from the babes, in the part 2 of this entire thing. But so far, thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. If you have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, the DMs are open. On IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime. On Westside, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next break.